My name is Dipalan, and I'm going to discuss about biomimetic managers, which is preparing managers for new challenges. Now, before I get into this, I need to point out that I already have a video on innovation through biomimicry. You can go through it. It's quite exhaustive, and this is just an extension of that. Now, biomimicry, as probably you're aware by now, is trying to uh, find innovative solutions using the time-tested patterns and strategies which is used by nature, uh, which is available for us for 3.8 years of 8 billion years of evolution. So what managers can learn from nature is what this particular video is going to be about. Now, before I get into this, let me also caution that human societies, human beings, organizations are different from what you see in nature. So one may not be able to kind of completely apply the understanding of nature into management systems, but yes, there is a lot of possibilities and there is a lot of innovations which is happening in management through understanding of nature, and the intention of this particular video is to focus on that. So before I go into this, let me also mention that again that most of the things have been explained in my earlier video, that is innovation through biomimicry. So all this has been exhaustively covered, but I'm just going to give a brief here. This is Kokulbar, and this has been responsible for a $500 million product. And this an engineer actually went for a walk, and he saw something sticking out of his fabric, and he studied this further, and it was found that this was Kokulbar, a smaller version of this, and he created a product out of it which is called Velcro. This is the product which he created, which is a hook and loop version of it. This is a micro picture of that, and this is another product which is inspired by Kingfisher, and by testing. You are not actually mimicking. Again, please go through my first video, that is innovation through biomimicry. Kingfisher became a kind of an inspiration. They emulated the shape and the structure of the beat, the engine, the shape of the engine, and actually were able to increase the speed as well as reduce the sonic boom, and also made it more efficient. So these are different examples, but my idea here is to kind of focus on biomimetic manager. This is the process of invention. So this is sustainable innovations or inventions which is trying to emulate, which is emulating the 3.8 billion years of R&D which is available through nature. So the contemporary manager is a reflection of the world we live in. We inhabit a world which is very chaotic, and as you can see in this slide here, there's so much of factors which is influencing people are taking decisions. And when I talk about managers, it's also about policy makers. So there are so much of factors which influence when you take a decision. And you look here, you know, the economy and the fluctuations of economy, and now we are living in a pandemic, and how it is going to impact the economy. And the economy has a direct impact on the decisions you take as a manager. And then there is a depletion of natural resources, and which has to be factored in, and then there is a climate change, a looming climate change which has already started to have impact. And then you have social media, the proliferation and democratization of information which is happening, and not only that, it is instigating social unrest as well as self-organization for good causes. And there is and within the organizations also, all the employees are connected to social media. So the informal grouping is very much influenced by what's happening in social media, and they are dynamically integrated to the fast changing world. So the employees in the last 2 decades or 1 decade are not the same as before in 1980s. A lot of things have changed, and this social media is increasingly occupying the mind space of people, and it is impacting their attitude and relationship in the workspace. So it's also raising expectations, and at the organization level, the decision makings are scrutinized. It's becoming more transparent, Then we also have the threat of artificial intelligence and how it is impacting. There is a paradigm shift which is happening in the workplace, and within the society also. And there have been a lot of discussion regarding how it is going to have a social impact as well as manufacturing impact the manufacturing space. The artificial intelligence definitely is a factor which is definitely going to influence the decision making. So so there is a evolving complexities under which the manager is functioning. So what the manager tries to do is that he or she is trying to attempt an order by refining principles or theories or practices, but the factors which is influencing decision making is keeping on increasing. It is exponentially increasing, and I'm sure you have read Herbert Simon, who gave a theory of bounded rationality in 1970s, where he said the manager is never able to take correct, precise decision because obtaining and processing all the information is very difficult. So he used the word satisficing, which is a combination of what satisfy and suffice. And because of all the factors which is there, and now we also have so much of information in the fingertips, and not only information, there is misinformation, there is fakes, deep fakes. All these have added in the last 1 decade, and which is even questioning the whole reality. So imagine the complexities which has arisen in the last decade, and so much of information that we are getting lost in what is right or what is wrong. And not only that, I think it was T.S. Eliot who said that where is the wisdom we have lost in the knowledge, and where is the knowledge we have lost in the information. So there is rumors, there is prejudices, there is manipulations, and have impacted the ability to remove the chaff from matter. So these are the factors on which today's manager is working. He or she has to kind of work in terms of managing chaos. So that is a very important space for study, that is managing chaos. So we're going to look at how in nature chaos is managed and what we can learn from nature in terms of managing chaos. So the question now is what contemporary managers can learn by being in chaos. Nature works in chaos, and in nature nothing is predictable nor stable. It will not be an exaggeration to say that nature or natural world lives in the edge of chaos. Now when I say natural world, it also means that we are also part of this natural world, and in this chaos there is an attempt to create a form in this non-linear, complex, diverse system. The life evolves. Life therefore evolves or emerges out of chaos. I mean, just look at the way the earth evolved and way life evolved on earth 3.8 billion years back. The circumstances in which the life started forming, it was a chaotic system. So it is not an exaggeration to say that we are living on the edge of chaos, and it is the edge of chaos where the life innovates. Here things are not hardwired, they are very flexible, because when you are flexible there is a possibility of new connections or solutions to occur. So that is one thing a manager can learn, is that flexibility gives more opportunities and creates more connections for solutions to occur. So there is a new level of order that becomes possible out of chaos. In fact, every organism is exposed to chaos, and this chaos puts an evolutionary pressure on life. So that is how life tends to evolve. That is how species tend to evolve, because they're trying to evolve, they're trying to understand, they're trying to reckon with the chaos around. It's an attempt to bring order into this chaos. So that can, if you look at evolution, you can define it that way. It's a very important way of to define evolution. It's to seek a pattern to organize itself. So flexibility is therefore inbuilt for survival. Life replicates what works, but there is never a status quo. Life is constantly learning, evolving, and adapting. Now, to think of it, each idea or each invention or each creative expression has arisen out of to seek order. Now, I was reading somewhere that our brain waves are actually the signals. When they studied the signals of the brains, they were very chaotic, unlike heart, which has a pattern. So when a person is having heart problems disturbed, and you can find through ECG that there's some problem, but the signals from the brain is always chaotic. In fact, when a pattern starts forming in the brain signal, it means that the person is going to have a seizure. Or so our brain is also attuned to chaos, unlike what we presume. So the question here is, if that is what reality is, then why is that our organization, even the social or political way the things are organized, is hierarchical, based on command and control? So the picture which you see here is the ant. They have coalesced together to escape the flood. So resilient and adaptive, or I would add complex adaptive organization that dynamically balance chaos and order. Now that is how nature works, and that is where we are really going to focus our attention. So we're going to understand a concept called chaotic path, or chaotic leadership, or chaotic organizations. Now this was given by Dee Hock, who is the founder CEO of Visa. It's a very important concept to understand how a manager can deal with chaos. Now if you look at here, there is Camos. Camos is on the left side is a pit of despair, it's complete breakdown, and then we have chaos, the natural order of things that we face now, or the nature faces all the time. And somewhere between Camos and chaos is where the activism happens, because there's a complete breakdown and there's a chaos. This is a place where activism happens and people gather together to protest, and it can turn violent. And then we have on the other side control, a complete control, which is some organization. That is how the command and control. So a completely hierarchical system, and the reaction would be apathy and revolt. And then we have order. Somewhere between order and control is where the management works. That is how the organization functions. But what we are now looking at is a shift from between order and control towards somewhere managing, which is more nearer to the realities of nature, the realities of life. And that is, we have to look for a space between chaos and order, and that is what the chaotic space becomes a very important way to understand. Now this chaotic space is a decentralized, highly collaborative space. It's an adaptive, complex space that blends the characteristics of both chaos and order. There is always an attempt to reduce uncertainty, and this space seems to be an important space to deal with emerging challenges. So how do we deal with the space of complexity, unpredictability, and unknown? So that becomes important understanding. We'll discuss this further. So before we go into further, let's look at what Dee Hock had to say. We must seriously question the concepts underlining the current structures of organization and whether they are suitable to the management of accelerating societal and environmental problems, and even beyond that, we must seriously consider whether they are the primary cause of those problems. So the emergent leadership can only be seen through this chaotic space, and it's a decentralized, highly collaborative, adaptive, complex space, as I said earlier. But this space is actually based on fear and uncertainty. There's a lot of ambiguity, and that is the reason why the leadership generally shifts towards control and order, and that is where the management functions. So we have to kind of be more brave to accept the realities of chaos we live in, and move towards more adaptive systems rather than more technical or more control oriented system. Now let me also point out, a lot of workshops are conducted on chaotic space or chaotic organizations or leadership. The intention here is not to discuss this in detail, but just give a brief idea, so that if you find it interesting, and take it to the next level. So the question here is, how do we have a form and order into this space, into this chaotic space? How do you create this form and order? In the meantime, letting the emergent properties of complex systems to bring new ideas, insights, and innovations. So this balancing is where we need to work on, and and also to understand the complex, unprecedented challenges we are facing, and we need to have a kind of a space for conversation of all the stakeholders and different viewpoints and understanding. And the chaos can be used as a leverage for change. So when people come together, quality of action tend to change, and it can be a space for holding conversations, meeting, or long-term strategic initiatives. So chaotic space becomes a significant working of unpredictable complex. So we are going to discuss chaotic stepping stones, and this is a kind of a concept by which you can actually negotiate the so-called treacherous path between chaos and order to reach some sort of an understanding. And this stepping stone actually is actuated by asking key questions, and each stones are steps in the key inquiries that will lead us to navigate the change. It's like a little anchors as we attempt to cross this path. So it provides a guiding path, it provides a lens to examine circumstances, to plan and reflect, and each step create a generative structure which allow us to be more effective in each stage of work. This stepping stone actually encourages us to be more inquisitive, creative, and actively seeking new ideas. And this is what we're going to discuss in the next few minutes. So we'll discuss all these 9 points here, which act as a kind of a anchor for us to negotiate this path between chaos and order, which is called a chaotic path. And as a manager, we need to have a kind of a paradigm shift in the way we understand things, to when we are negotiating, when we are working in a group. So I hope this will help. So we're going to discuss about chaotic stepping stones, and I said in the last slide, these are the anchors by which you can cross the chaotic space. The chaotic space is a chaotic space. It is a volatile space between order and chaos, and that closely emulates nature, the life. So as a manager of as a contemporary manager, we have to understand that this is a very volatile situation which we are in. So to be effective, one needs to first identify the need. Now the need here is not to anticipate, it is in terms of silencing yourself. Now I'm going to talk about few things which might sound groovy, but this is how we need to have a qualitative shift in the way we deal with the things. So the need can be identified if you are deeply attuned to your surrounding, the reality. All the great thoughts, ideas, and inventions which has helped us to understand the world better, happened because of it's a deep connection to the reality. So what we need here is that we need to kind of be present. Being present is very important, and which means that you have to awaken your senses, and you have to kind of explore the stream thoughts to understand the problem. You have to explore your streams of thought to understand the problems, and you have to kind of begin it's a kind of a beginning of energy that need to be channelized. Now all this sounds quite unconventional, but this is how one can identify the needs, because this will make one responsive, and when you become responsive to what need to happen. So the question that must be asked as a manager is, what is the need that this project can uniquely meet? Why are we doing this? Why is it important? What context are we operating in? The challenges and opportunities we're facing. What do we need to know or understand? Why is this important to me and my organization? You need to be collectively clear of the need to begin the conversation. So it's kind of a broader understanding where you are silencing yourself to get connected to the reality. In that context, these questions need to be asked. So the next one is purpose. Now the purpose is a simple state of intent. If anything imaginable is possible, if there is no constraint whatever, what would be the nature of the ideal organization? It is not about what we can, it is more than what we can accomplish. What is the highest aspiration of this particular project? No, it's not, greed cannot be the purpose. You see, I'm sorry, what I meant was profit. Profit cannot be the sole purpose. It may be an objective, it may be necessity, it may be a gratification, but it is not the purpose. The question is not what do you want to do, but instead what do you want to deliver? What do you want to become? This is not a statement of action, necessary achievements of behavior. They are statements of what we as a group need to become to be able to be the best act together in the context we are in. So, a clear sense of purpose is rooted in the need. Purpose creates clarity that draws resources, talent, and ideas. Developing a minimum clarity that invites possibilities. What is the simplest and most compelling questions we can keep at the core of our work? So that is purpose. Next we go to principles. So what unique ways of doing work and being together can we bring to this work? It is not about what do I stand for. It is also about what do I stand for. What will I live for or die for? What are my boundaries? What is a clear, unambiguous statement that I can make that articulates where I say yes or no? These principles are arrived together. So these are not written or dictated by anyone. These are created together. It's as we organically develop. Please understand that these stepping stones, these Kardec stepping stones are actually a process by which the group is evolving. So it is not that I bring my boundaries, it is that we evolve to create a boundary. I bring my own, but then we discuss and we create a boundary for the group. So that is what the principles, it's a common denominator that binds. It is a shared set of principles to rely on when your work enters a complex or chaotic space. So once the need and the purpose are in place, we have to agree on the principles of cooperation. We have agreed on our principles of cooperation. Our next concern is to identify the people who are to work with us. So that is where we move to people. It helps us to articulate as to who is in this work alongside us and who are interested in what we are doing. Who are the supporters, champions, or mentors, or guides? Who are the resource people? What voices do we need to engage to be able to best serve the needs of the stakeholder? What do we need to keep, be aware, or develop, or avoid? So we can then create a circle of engagements. We can have a core team consisting of people who are fully committed or responsible for the project. The second ring of engagement, we can have essential participants in the process but not part of the core team. These include people who have expertise you need, influencers, who are required to sustain the work. In the third ring are people who will consult with and keep closely informed about the process. They may not have a decision making power, but not including them in the meeting will diminish the project. Finally, on the fourth ring are the names of the people who will need to know what you are up to, even though they may not be directly engaged. So organizing people this way also makes it easier for people to become more or less involved in your project. For example, someone in the core team who needs to step out for time or other commitments can move out of the wider ring and can still be involved. They can be replaced with someone who is closer to the center, who will have to do less work to get up to speed up on the work of the core team. So you see, we are not living in medieval times to have organization who keep employees in cells or fixed positions. Organization need to be permeable. It must emulate the living system. We need to put work in the middle and allow human relationships to organize around it. This is how nature does it. For instance, a relationship of ants in a nest has evolved around work. Their function is also flexible to the urgency of the need. And we're going to discuss that later also. In permeable system, people can move in and out without feeling guilty. There is freedom and stress-free involvement in work. So there will be a growing respect and trust. There will be a growing commitment. There will be realization that what they're doing is as much more about personal transformation as it is about organizational reconception. So they'll try to put in their they'll definitely try to put in their full potential. See, when people free themselves from all inhibitions and restrictions and act on their innermost aspirations and deepest beliefs and do not bind themselves into structure or hierarchy, they realize that number and variety of people with whom they can work with is such much greater than they realize. They also discover how narrow and restrictive existing institutions are in relation to the immense diversity and complexity of society. So, as I said, you need to have a kind of a paradigm shift in the way to deal with people or the way an organization functions. If you want to be a biomimetic manager, if you want to emulate life, and if you want to evolve in the chaotic space, in the space between chaos and order. The next is a concept. It's a kind of a first draft or a sketch of what work might look like, the shape of our endeavor. How are we going to organize together? What is the best basic organization pattern? So the organization concept is a perception of structure that all may trust to be equitable, just and effective. See, it is impossible, as De Hoc once wrote, it is impossible to describe how difficult it is to imagine all the permutations and possibilities of human relationship that arise when one truly accepts that organization exists only in mind, that they are no more than conceptual embodiments of ancient ideas of community. So we need to kind of shift a kind of a absolute paradigm shift in terms of how to organize ourselves, how the organization need to be organized, how do we organize when you're facing a particular situation. So it may be easy or comfortable or reassuring to avoid difficulty by going into the old concepts or using new terminology that camouflaged as old. See, one has to look at different diverse ways in which species have organized themselves depending on the evolutionary pressures and opportunities of the ecosystem. So we need to kind of break this eggshell and open to all kinds of possibilities. Of course, when you're open to all kinds of possibilities which you've never ever planned for or never experienced, you will definitely be terrified. In fact, it will be frightful, and you will all have all the options and all the intentions to go back crawling to your clearly defined options, the way things have been done, But please understand, extraordinary insight emerge when there is a realization that any concept of relationship that can be imagined can be codified and legally brought into being. So any relationship, any form of functioning in a group is possible, depending on the situation, depending on the context. That is precisely how nature functions. So that is how we need to kind of organize our dealings. So when we are in a chaotic space, which is a collaborative effort, it's an innovative and powerful way of working together. There will be a fear and anxiety that comes when you are entering the unknown, because these are not known. We don't have any plans for what we are experiencing. We are evolving and we are understanding, we are moving with what we face. So in traditional methods of organizing, rarely behavioral patterns or attitudes are factored in. But we need to understand that something inside us gets in the way to be a collective successful. There are many inhibitory factors that may range from personal to cultural that asserts itself in varying negative impact. These are what we call limiting beliefs. So first we need to kind of identify these limits, because these limits, because if you don't understand these limits, the true potential of collaborative effort, it is futile to expect innovations using old models and approaches if they are not matched to the contemporary needs and contexts. It is about time to critically scrutinize ways in which we assume work gets done in order to discover new ways that might serve work with new results. It's an exercise of narrowing down and recognizing what might hold us back as an individual, as also as a group. The fears, anxieties, and limiting beliefs need to be identified before we inadvertently build them in our plans and processes. So, what will it take us to fully enter into working in new and unfamiliar ways? How am I or we part of the problem? What do we fear about new ways of working together? What will it take us to fully enter into working in new and unfamiliar ways? So next we move to structure. Structure helps us to channelize the resources. Structure is not limiting but synergizing all stepping stones. If purpose was about this is what I'm going to do, structure is about this is how I'm going to do it. So what is the lighter structure that we can serve our purpose and need? How do we wisely combine the various organizational concepts to put our work and sustain the results? How will we make decisions? Practice is the next one is practice is working with one another in alignment and with designs we have created. So the intention here is to work together in ways that is more effective. What do we need to do to sustain our work together? How do we sustain and nourish our relationship and collective aspirations? So this is moving towards kind of action. So having understood the limiting beliefs and having put the structure in place, we go in for action. Now harvest is the last one. Obviously all these steps are need to be elaborated quite significantly, but the intention is to introduce. So the last one is harvest. It's about learning. It's about what we've learned from this experience. So to make us more responsive to another experience and also sharing effectively. So knowledge is an important input that makes us effective in chaotic path. You learn or you perish. Therefore, you have to keep updating yourself to survive. And that is how species evolve. There's a lot of evolutionary pressure in terms of Earth is a volatile system. There are a lot of things which is happening. So a species has to kind of learn from the surrounding, keep on updating it yourself. Of course, now even the job market is also quite volatile. You have to keep on updating yourself. So, this that is a binary to face chaos as to work a pattern of order. You need to have a chaotic confidence to face this reality. How will we stay open to new, evolving, and fresh learning? So, stepping stones are not done in isolation. It is delivering in a community that is created by us. So, it's a kind of a evolutionary process. It is as we move, we grow. So, again, all these steps are elaborately mentioned in some of the websites. A lot of workshops are conducted, full day workshops and few days workshops on identifying the group coming together and trying to work out. So when we have varying, like for discussion of climate change, or when we have varying views, and not exactly view in terms of whether it is happening or not. Obviously it is anthropogenic, climate change is anthropogenic and it is happening, there is no doubt. But when we have nations coming together and trying to bargain a deal, chaotic stepping stones or chaotic path or chaotic leadership or biomimetic manager can be a very effective way of finding a solution. So the idea here is that new emerging realities need new ways of dealing, and this is an attempt to kind of introduce you to a new way of thinking. So having understood that we live in edge of chaos, and today's manager has to deal with amazing amount of information, data, and so much of it's a chaotic world, as I said earlier. So we need a new operating system for organization. So we need organization that must be considered as a naturally evolving network and not stratified, ossified command and control. So swarms are a complex, continuously optimizing network that is being closely looked. So that is where swarms. You must have seen swarms of birds and insects like ants and bees. So swarm intelligence is a behavior exhibited by assembly of social insects and higher life form like birds for self-organizing into intricate arrangements and synchronized motions. They control and manage their position with the help of local interaction within the same species. So in the recent time, a lot of studies have been done on swarm intelligence. Now let me put a word of caution here. Although biomimetic solutions, biomimetic managers have a lot to learn from swarm intelligence, but let's also understand that human beings are, of course, qualitatively different from insects or birds. We are conscious, and we are quite complex, and we have our egos, and we have a strong sense of liberty and freedom and so on. So, but even then, we need to understand swarm intelligence and how the swarm works. These are essentially nature's organizational blueprint for dealing with chaos. So it's a kind of a symphony on the edge of chaos. You will definitely feel this when you see when you watch murmuration of starlings. It's a sight to behold. When hundreds and thousands of starlings fly in intricately coordinated patterns across the sky. If you've not seen it actually in your real life, I suggest you go to some videos and watch it. It's amazing. There is no supervisors, just some simple rules to be followed by each individuals. It may sound simple, but it's not simplistic, and more research has been conducted in recent times to understand this in detail and maybe take the algorithm. It's an example of remarkable ability to maintain cohesion as a group in a highly chaotic and unpredictable situation. So this is where biomimetic managers can have a look and learn. There is a tandem between individual action and group cohesiveness. It's a unique insight into managing uncertainty while also maintaining consensus. This is swarm intelligence, and swarm intelligence biomimetic solutions, a lot of applications, as I said. So we can extend that to self-management, collaborative teamwork, collective intelligence, distributed leadership, and how swarm can be explored to enhance creativity and innovation. Let's understand that as organization and strategies get more complex, it becomes imperative to let go highly controlled top-down leadership and move towards more self-organizing systems. So simple rules becomes more important to streamline and create self-evolving participatory decision making. This not only prevents bottleneck in the system but also keeps it attuned to changing parameters. Simplified decision making with a set of evolved agreements. When an organization decentralizes their decision making towards employees, the organization becomes adaptable and sense changes much faster. So diversity within a group also becomes a source for innovation for the company. So when we talk about swarm intelligence, one thing which strikes is they're individually simple but collectively brilliant. Look at these ants here, weaver ants, and I get to see these weaver ants quite often where I stay. It's amazing to watch. And here they are creating live bridge, the way they're solving problems. Individually, an insect is unremarkable in performing a task, but as a group, they are spectacular. It is nothing short of miracle, as you see thousands of ants go about performing tasks without any supervision or monitoring. In nature, nobody is in charge. There are no CEOs, but they get the task done wonderfully well. Each ant has incomplete information for solving the problem. For instance, where to forage for food. There are no orders, no commanding controls or hierarchy. Data is decentralized, does not have to go through one center. And calculation where to go is asynchronous, as they build their results incrementally. These bottom-up biological networks are complex adaptive systems dynamically attuned to the local, from the numerous interaction among individuals in the system and a constant feedback learning iteration. So it's the process of deep connection with the reality, if I put it that way. So complete iteration and learning process going on. A pattern emerges which forms the basis of self-assembly. This makes the system extremely resilient and agile, meanwhile acquiring an intelligence that is uniquely innovative, hence accomplishing complex tasks. Self-organization contributes to both development and growth because it sets a groundwork for a system to move from simple to complex in orderly fashion. So social insects have been so successful because of three characteristics. One is flexibility, then robustness, and self-organization. So organization can learn, biomimetic manager can learn a lot of things about what makes a swarm intelligent or a social insect successful. Flexibility, they can adapt to changing environment. That is how organization must function in a chaotic situation. They must be very attuned to the reality and adapt accordingly. They must be robust. It means that they are not dependent on one or two individuals or few individuals. It is highly decentralized and the group can still perform the task, and it is self-organized, so not centrally controlled as such. The most powerful and indeed fascinating insight from swarm intelligence is that the complex collective behavior can emerge from individuals following simple rules. That many organizations ranging from hundreds and thousands of birds to millions of locusts come together and move as one coordinated entity is indeed a spectacular display of nature. What makes it so special is because they follow very simple rules for each individual has to abide by. In case of murmuration of starlings, in case you've seen these birds, they follow very simple rules, and that is in fact studies have shown that there are 7 rules in fact, but the 3 basic rule is that they have to maintain certain speed range, they have to stay close, avoid collusion. In case you've seen these birds flying in the heights, they form the V shapes, the geese, they form a V shape. They're following very simple rules. In fact, there are 4 rules. First is stay close and use the updraft benefit, which means you're using the energy which is created in front of you by the other bird, and then give space so that not to collide, move sideways for an unobstructive view, and set speed and direction to that of closest neighbor. So these 4 things you follow and you create a kind of a system which is optimal and which tends to what we call exhibit the behavior of swarm intelligence. There is other advantage to swarm apart from accomplishing complex tasks they cannot as an individual. There is a survival strategy to fool the predator as they look much larger and formidable. Further, large congregation reduces the chance of single individual being captured as it confuses predator. So these are the characteristic of swarm intelligence, and we need to kind of explore this further. So having understood swarm intelligence, let's understand that human beings really do not create swarm, because we are not like insects or birds. Human beings are much complicated species, and they have their own egos and ideas of liberty and equality and other factors put in. Our intelligence is more of neurological intelligence. In nature there are two types of intelligence. The intelligence are created by two ways. One is neural intelligence, another is swarm intelligence. Human intelligence is based on neurology, and essentially it is brain and neural network which leads to critical thinking, self-awareness, creativity, so on. So human really cannot create swarm. But what we have done in the last few years is that we have created algorithms and interface by which we have created artificial hive minds. It's a very innovative way of looking at decision making. So what we have done is we have created artificial swarm intelligence of human minds to amplify and find optimized solution to a problem. Swarming helps bring group to find solution that are satisfactory for the group as a whole. People with diverse background and different perspectives can combine their divergent views in most efficient ways and converge on decisions they can all best agree upon. So what I've done is, on the right side you see there is it's actually quite interesting the way it has happened in the last few years. So what they've done is that they try to predict the Oscar award winners, and probably this is a few years back. I recall this Shape of Water actually won the Oscar, and yeah. So it is similar to this. So we have I'm giving the other example here. So we have 7 friends who want to take a decision on which movie to go for on the weekend, and let's assume there are 4 movies which to choose from, and these are A, B, C, D to choose from. And traditional way of taking a decision would be to take a vote. Therefore the movie with more number of votes is a winner. Let's assume it's A. Now if A is winning maximum number of votes and it's a winner, there's a problem, because many in the group may not have voted for the movie for various reasons, including they may not have already watched the movie, hence will not like the decision. The most popular answer may not be the most optimized answer. So that is what happens, the conventional way of taking decisions in a collective scene. Now when you do swarming, it's not voting by a real-time system with it's not voting, but it's actually a real-time system with feedback loop. Everyone is acting on the choice, reacting to others' choice, and interacting on all the choices. That's very important. So it's a real-time system. So one who is interested in a movie B may well be willing to go for C, so pulling the swarm towards C, while another who is interested in D may not mind going for B but would not go for A, so he pulls it towards B. All these moves are happening. The swarm intelligence algorithm watches the real-time behavior of every participant, assessing their strength of conviction and determining how the swarm should move at every instance. So apart from the decisions being noted, it is also doing face reading. So it is also trying to kind of conjuncture, so based on all these factors put together. So as a group wrestle with the issue, the algorithm finds the optimal path of collective satisfaction of the group. In an organization, this can give insight into product features, management decisions, optimal selections and recruitments, and so on. So it has a lot of potential when you have swarming. Artificial swarming is taken to make decisions. So now imagine, instead of 7, there are hundreds and thousands of people discussing on whom they will like to vote or which product in the market is the best. Humans can not only work with facts and figures, they are also able to rely on opinions, instincts and gut reactions, something that machines cannot really understand. This is where the social media platform becomes interesting. The reason why real-time data is becoming precious is because you can always understand how people are thinking, and then we can put this swarm intelligence algorithm and we can understand where people's choices are moving. Each human becomes a data processor. So artificial intelligence is this particular instance where on the right side it became quite it was discussed in detail in the newspaper because of the way they were able to predict the Oscar winners. So some group of people who were just about above average about movies, they were able to predict the Oscar winners more than the experts could. So it had a almost an average of 54. They got 54% of the prediction right. So the collectively group has an accuracy rate of 75% compared to the experts. So this, as I said, artificial swarming is trying to replicate the natural swarming by creating hive minds. And as I pointed out earlier, because of the social media, real-time data are collected, and you can actually find the way the people are moving towards a particular choice and in the end taking decisions. So a lot of implications and applications of this. So the managers of the future will be dealing more with algorithms than human beings. And since algorithms are excellent in identifying patterns too subtle to be detected by human observations, and using these patterns to generate accurate insights and inform better decision making. There are of course challenges and risks are there, limitations are there, and that is can be understood through effective management, because the data needs to be wide. That is another thing, and it needs to be diverse. And real-time data often pertains to short-term outcomes, and there can be a stress between short-term success and long-term profit and broad corporate goals. So these are the challenges, but one thing is very clear, that the managers of the future are going to deal more with algorithms. So this is an example of Capital One, which is American financial company, and also another company, Hewlett Packard. What they did was that they created basic guidelines, simple basic guidelines on the line of simple rules of swarm intelligence for the employees to kind of follow, to have so that everyone, to ensure that everyone in the organization was working towards the same goals. And this after years, these rules became so ingrained in the employees that it becomes a mantra of the organization. In addition to unifying this group, the rules empowered employees to make a decision on their own and work with little top-down management. So it not only reduced attrition rate to below 4%, but compared to 20% attrition rate of the industry. So it had a kind of a positive impact. Swarming has possibility in bringing people together for a cause that is tangible, credible, and inclusive. The autonomy it provides can skill the purpose that is participatory. This can be of much help during crisis situation. The more passionately and with clarity an idea is presented, interests and motivates the group. They feel part of it. This is precisely what Honeybee does when it's trying to recruit bees for new site. See, Honeybee actually communicate by doing something called a waggle dance, and this was deciphered by Scandinavian ethologist Mr. Frisch, Dr. Frisch, who actually won a Nobel Prize for it. They communicate, the bees communicate through through a dance, and they are able to communicate not only the direction but the distance to fellow bees. The more excited the bees is about the site, more rapidly they waggle to get the attention of potential recruit bees and try to convince them. This template can provide input into how to build an organization that harness motivational power and trust autonomy. So ideas rule. So if your idea is passionate, it attracts more number of people. So this is precisely what happens in beehive. So you need to create interest through passion and seek commitment. So here is a model for work allocation that can be learned from ants. So most species of ants do have this, and they have their work allocated, but the work allocation is actually quite flexible. So you have foraging ants, you have patrolling ants, you have bed and work ants, and nest maintenance ants who are inside the nest. But when there is a lot of availability of food, the priority changes. So at that point, all the ants occupation shifts towards foraging food. So it's very flexible depending on the circumstances, context, and the emergencies. So that is what is important when you are organizing a particular when you are dealing with organizing people in a setup. You see, several organizations, particularly the one online platforms, are already using self-organization rules as a foundation for the business, essentially turning them into self-organized workforce. So this has started to happen, as a trend towards free agent workers continues. As now people are moving towards working from home also, the very notion of what constitutes an organization is blurring. As teams of free agents, recruits are created on a project to project basis, what kind of rules are best to organize their work will become very crucial. Further, the task of crafting the right fundamental rules to shape an organization is not often easy. Even a small change in instruction can have a cataclysmic different outcomes. So although the instructions can be very simple, but a small change in the instruction can be cataclysmic, and you need to be very careful what are the instructions, simple instructions one need to be following. So the question here is the manager must be therefore very wary of implementing rules that might lead to unforeseen undesirable behaviors. So this is another example of swarm intelligence which was applied by a company and was very successful. So this is Southwest Airlines, which had trouble with cargo operation. Many of its planes were using only 7% of the cargo space, but at some airports there wasn't enough capacity to accommodate scheduled loads of freight, which led to bottlenecks. So the freight was loaded onto the first plane going to the right direction, but these operations made workers to spend more time moving cargo from one plane to another. So they had a kind of a issue here, and a logistic issue here. So to solve the problem, what the Southwest researcher did was that they started looking at the way ants were foraging using simple rules, and finding efficient routes to food source. So they built an algorithm to calculate the best route in each situation. When they applied this algorithm to Southwest problems of the Southwest Airlines, they discovered a more efficient way to manage the cargo. So they were able to kind of optimize their strategy utilizing the optimal routes which is followed by ants. So a very important example here. So this is another example of swarm intelligence algorithm which was used for by Unilever for optimal scheduling. So what they did here was that they actually went one step further on foraging algorithm. So they had this, the company was having this problem in terms of developing efficient way to deploy equipments in one of its production facilities, and they found that traditional optimization methods could not handle the intricacies of complex manufacturing plant. So what they did was that they worked this foraging algorithm further. So instead of minimizing the time to get something from one location to another, the program must determine the shortest time to perform a set of jobs given various constraints. So that is how they shifted it, and they used digital pheromones. So as you probably know, the ants use natural pheromones. So they use digital pheromones, and the software ants find fastest legal schedule, and one that allocates the job to resources while setting all constraints and making sure that every job is performed. So the Unilever program was coping very easily with the changing conditions. So when a piece of machinery breaks down or demand for a particular product changes abruptly, for example, software adjusts the schedule quickly and automatically. So it was real-time changes which was applied, and swarm intelligence was the basis of this. A very good example here. So another application of swarm intelligence is in work allocation. So what we have here is harvester ants, which is generally found in South America. So they actually forage food, and they take it back to the nest using relay system in this what we call bucket brigade system. That is like, you know, in relay race you have passing the baton. So which means the ant will bring the food from the source and pass it on to the another ant which it meets on the way. So that is how the chain is created. So it's like passing the bucket, you know. So but the ant is the transfer of the food stationary point is not stationary, which means the ant which is more industrious is going to cover more space, more distance. So that is one factor which the algorithm of this particular seed harvester ant is applying. So this is been applied in warehousing in Amazon and other places. Now here what happens is that you know, in different employees have different ways of working. The quickest could be 4 times as faster as the slowest. So this particular strategy helps us to understand who are the more efficient workers and who are not. Also, it allows work lines to balance itself, and the optimal solution emerges without intervention by the managers. And the system is also flexible and robust, easily adapted to unexpected surge demand for a particular product. So it has its own advantages. Of course, the disadvantages could be that you cannot really treat human beings as you know, they have their human rights and labor laws and all that put together. But what I'm trying to point out here is that we can learn from a lot of this self-sustaining systems from swarm intelligence. So now we'll discuss about swarm intelligence in the recruitment strategies. Now, different insights into different strategies, which is recruitment strategies followed by different species of ants to attract nestmates to new food source is what we're going to focus. So there are generally 3 basic ways by which in which ant leads their fellow to new food source. So laying pheromone is a form of mass recruitment. A large mass of ant is attracted down the path where the pheromone is strongest. In some species, though, an ant that finds a food source returns to the nest and vibrates antenna to convince one another nest mate to return to the site. So we have mass recruitment, and then we have what we call recruiting one ant, that is tandem recruitment. That is called tandem recruitment. In another case, that is the third case, we have an ant vibrates its antenna to get a number of nestmates to follow. This is called group recruitment. In all the 3 cases, individual ants can convey information about the quality of food source either by laying pheromones or by increasing the frequency of their antenna vibration. So these are 3 different ways by which ants are recruiting for foraging. So, but it turned out that one method is much more effective under certain circumstances. Researchers, what they did was that they placed food source at a certain distance from a nest of ants and watched as the colony began to raid the food. Then they placed a source of richer food at a different location, an equal distance from the nest. The colony, using mass recruitment approach, was unable to shift to better food because the trail to the first source was already reinforced too heavily. So which means they were not able to shift towards the more nutritious food. The colony, using tandem recruitment, diverted several individuals quickly, but the number was too small to take full advantage of the richer food source. The colony practicing group recruitment was both flexible and efficient. Many nestmates were quickly enlisted to raid the superior food source. So different strategies, but one has more advantage. So it was found that the mass recruitment is most often associated with large colonies, tandem recruitment with small colonies, and group recruitment with medium-sized colonies. There's millions of years of evolution have shaped these strategies. For a large colony that can defend its food source, a strong pheromone trail makes strategic sense, particularly when the huge food source is discovered. Small colonies are less able to defend themselves from predators and competitors, so flexible foraging strategy is advantageous because it enables the ants to quickly move to another food source when they are threatened. Group recruitment appears to be an ideal for medium-sized colonies in a fast-changing, unpredictable environment. It helps to exploit food sources efficiently while remaining flexible and capable of exploring their surrounding and for additional food sources. So there are different strategies, and very important understanding from these different. So the recruitment strategies which we discussed in the last slide has implication for companies as well, because they have the same context. So it depends on the size of the organization, the characteristics of the marketplace, and the competitive environment. So it is similar to the strategies, the circumstances which the ants are facing. So when the market are volatile and short-lived but sufficiently large, and when competition can emerge from anywhere, the ideal enterprise would be the medium size. The classic example of an organization with faulty recruitment mechanism is Xerox. So it's a birthplace of amazing technologies that the company repeatedly failed to exploit. In a way, Xerox was like a huge ant colony, where a colony of ants that relied on mass recruitment, which impeded the company's effort to divert the necessary resources away from its own main food source, that is the photocopier product. So one can say that Xerox its success became its failure, in fact. So another example of effective group recruitment is Enron, which was able to kind of divert and capitalize. You can read that somewhere. So one last slide on recruitment. Now most of the companies, a lot of companies are following the strategies from swarm intelligence. You can just go through it. Now please understand that as the physical workplace is withering to virtual space, and people are working from remote locations, flexible workplaces, trusting employees with autonomy becomes paramount. Meanwhile, you need to kind of remove the bottlenecks to function faster. And also, when you're venturing unknown, there will be mistakes made. Hence, it is incumbent on the managers to create a kind of accepting environment and an iterative learning process where failure is part of that learning. As organization becomes leaner, data becomes much more important, and it becomes scaffolding for the swarm. And more data means that you're able to emulate swarm optimization. So data becomes important, and algorithm becomes a very important asset for the manager in the future. So now we'll move to another important area, which is swarm planning. So as I said, we are living in the edge of the chaos, and this is literally true. The kind of climate changes impact which has been seen. So swarm planning becomes very important, and we need to spend some time understanding how to go about swarm planning. So let me do a small recap. You can do a small recap of what exactly is swarm intelligence to understand how do we go about swarm planning, which is an innovative design paradigm of planning, a kind of paradigm shift for planning. And swarm planning, this is swarm intelligence, what we have discussed. That is, we have 1 million heads and one beautiful mind and all that. So you can read this. And swarm planning is where we are facing a situation which is transforming constantly, which is a process of continuous optimization. So influenced by external impulses, directed by few simple rules. It is stochastic, which means it is random, but it is within the probabilistic system. So it is a complex system of which is close to chaos, on the edge of between chaos and effective intervention. So the conventional idea of planning will not be effective. The kind of chaos we are facing, the kind of fast changing situations we are in. So swarm planning becomes a very important way to kind of deal with the situations we are going to face. So not only the managers and decision makers, the policy makers need to understand that we need to kind of shift towards an innovative planning strategy. So the current planning is actually quite designed for linear problems, and procedures and rules are strongly established, and it tends to duplicate the past and repetitive solutions. Whereas the emerging conditions which we are faced with that is the broad range of information now it is available, after Internet of Things and other things, and leading to a large number of interactions. Endless interactions lead to high level of complexities, and combinatorial and multi-dimensional problems are emerging. So we are having these problem conditions which are emerging. So obviously the current planning ideas are not very effective. So we need a new planning strategies that incorporate dynamic environment, that anticipate future developments, but maintain flexibility, but better chance to cope with reducible uncertainties and imaginative and creative. So we need kind of a paradigm shift in planning, and swarm planning becomes a very important idea. So we need to factor in more complexities. Exposed to high level of complexity lead to better ability to adjust to new circumstances and make the system more robust. To reach higher level of complexities, new crucial intervention must be discovered, a new design paradigm in planning. Very important slide here, and maybe you could just freeze it and read it again, and maybe think about it. So we need to have a kind of innovation shift towards all these four parameters: government domination, technical driven, and market influence, and idea driven. So technique driven, sorry. So we need to move more towards idea driven. When I say market influence, it means that you should be attuned to the surrounding, so that the way things are evolving. So another example from nature could be biosecurity, which can be a highly responsive system, which looks for network security and testing identity, and also how to evaluate truth in the statements which is coming out through media. So this can emulate our defense mechanism within our body. So a lot of research are happening in this area. So I'm going to run through another management system which is being emulating nature, in this case amoeba, and this was done by Kyoto Ceramics in Japan. And what they have done is they have emulated amoeba and the single cell organism, which tends to divide as it grows bigger. So it tends to divide into two equal parts. So it is an extension of itself into autonomous bodies. So that has been taken, and we have here the criteria on which organizations are divided. So in case they have definable revenues and cost of sales, which is fiscally supporting, and also if it is self-contained business unit, and if it is supporting goals and objectives, so then they divide it. Also, the CEO of this Kyoto Ceramics had very simple rules, emulating the swarm intelligence simple rules, and he had four basic principles. These are the one which became the ethos and values of the company. These might look very simple, but it had a very serious impact and significant impact, and has led to the consolidation of the company. So the objectives of amoeba management has been emulated and been tried in other companies also, like for instance the divisional accounting system, which has been taken up by DISCO, that is a semiconductor manufacturing company. And then we have leadership development through managerial awareness, which was done by Japanese airlines. And then Capcom company also did management by all. So these are extension of amoeba management. So in case you want to know more about amoeba management, you could actually go and study this further. So this is an indication that how nature can be a source for innovation in management. So another concept is keystone species. Now first let's understand what is keystone species, and then how the corporates are able to apply this concept. And keystone species is the one whose presence and the role within an ecosystem has a disproportionate effect on other organisms within the system. A keystone species is often a dominant species whose removal allows a prey population to explode and often decreases overall diversity. For instance, you have these examples of Bengal tiger here, and then you have this otter and woodpecker and cactus. So these are examples of keystone species, because the moment you remove this, it has a kind of a deleterious effect on the system, and generally the system collapses. So it has, as I mentioned earlier, disproportionate effect on the system. So the examples are Microsoft and Walmart. So what they did is that they leverage the size of the company to create a keystone advantage. So what they did was that they simplified the challenge of connecting very large and distributed network of companies for its customers. So they acted as a crucial hub in vast and diverse business ecosystem. So they deliberately chose to shape the collective performance of the network of firms that depend on them by offering platforms on which they could build. So both these firms were actually successful because they appreciated the impact these platforms could have on these business networks and took steps to realize this impact by creating opportunities for other firms. So rather than traditional supply chain partners, what they did, they created an organic ecosystem, and both these firms were successful because they appreciated the impact these platforms could have on these business networks and took steps to realize this impact by creating real opportunities for other firms. So these firms made investments in leveraging these platforms while network of the firms began to depend on them for success. This created a kind of a virtuous cycle in their industry through which a broad variety of firms achieved high level of efficiency and productivity and innovativeness and stability also. So leading to outstanding performance for Microsoft and Walmart for a sustained period of time, in fact extending to decades. So they created a vast network of business partners numbering in tens and thousands. So these networks were dependent on them. So it became imperative for these networks to sustain Microsoft and Walmart in return for their survival, because they shared fate, and so they can only win if they continue to sustain the collective health of vast network of business partners. So they work to create, work to organize the behavior of these business partners, creating opportunities for growth and innovations. And their strength multiplied as this business community became large, healthy, and growing. So this is they created a kind of a specific features of ecosystem. They structure the relationship among members, kind of connection among them, the different roles, so on. So this is how Microsoft and Walmart actually were able to use the keystone advantage. It's a good example. So now I'm going to run through something which I've already discussed in my first video, that is innovation through biomimicry part 1, where you try to understand biomimicry and how we are trying to emulate through nature. So we are emulating through form, process, and system. So we are understanding how the nature is, how the species are structured, the way it is designed, and we try to emulate that, and then with the process and then the systems. I have discussed in detail the system. One of the terms which is quite frequently used, and I have also used, is the term business ecosystem. And though the lexicon is inspired from nature, this is used in a rather limited and isolated context of loose networks of suppliers, distributors, and producers of related products and services, so on. Prima facie, this is true, but the kind of havoc industries have unleashed on Earth's environment through hedonistic value system and wanton consumption, as if resources are not limited but coming from a mythical perpetual source. Add to this the fossil fuel production, plastics, and other non-biodegradables that has had led to a kind of air, water, and noise pollution, such as that disconnect and an incomplete understanding of nature of ecosystem. So natural ecosystem in return, as you can see, is a life thriving and nurturing space, and it seems contrary to every aspect that is proposed by business ecosystem, unless of course we have a paradigm shift in understanding what is expected of business ecosystem, as also its connection to natural ecosystem. Natural ecosystem provides services that involves creating a world of breathable air, fresh water, fertile soils, nutrition, so on, that if monetized could run into billions of dollars. The challenge here is how closely can business ecosystem emulate natural ecosystem and attempt at providing valuable services that is similar. This needs a sustainable innovations, but more than that, anything else, attitudinal shift is what is needed. So we need to move from take, make, waste, conveyor belt, exploitative economic model. We need to shift from there to systemic thinking, factoring in Earth as a system, with business being only a part. An ecosystem and its component have a shared fate. The system thrives when someone when everyone is healthy. At the same time, the system becomes unsustainable if the significant segments of the system are out of balance. So we need to understand that we are inextricably linked to the fate of Earth, and our survivability depends on being nurturing and life-affirming part of Earth's process. So, but what we have created is just today development essentially translate to destruction. So, rather than using the word business ecosystem, we need to take it seriously and emphasize on the semantics which is used. It's not loosely used. Ecosystem has a meaning. So, our business system needs to move towards a natural ecosystem. So, I've discussed in detail in my first video regarding systemic thinking. So, as we move towards being a biomimetic manager, it's important to have systemic thinking. It's important to understand that we are just part of the system called Earth. So, if you are a responsible manager, this kind of situation will not arise where your product leads to a destruction of the ecosystem. So, systemic thinking is now discussed in detail. A lot of literature is available, and you may go through it, and you also go through my first video. I have discussed this in exhaustively. So I'm going to briefly take out few examples from life principles which I've discussed in detail in my earlier video. So life principle is actually the strategies which is followed by a species to be successful. So we are trying to understand these principles behind it, and I'm just going to point out few which is going to help being a biomimetic manager. So the first one which I'm going to run through is the biomimetic manager need to be attuned to and responsive to the surrounding as most species do. So which means some examples of is the car models. They name the car models like Fitta. In Honda named a car called Fitta, which is an abuse word in Scandinavian countries, or Pinto, which was a Ford brand of car, which is also an abuse word in Brazil, and then Pajero, which is Mitsubishi's car in Spain, and so these are examples of vehicles brands which is named without not being locally attuned. Another very interesting example is this example of this car, which is a Nova car. Now Nova was introduced in South America, and Nova in South America in Spanish it means does not work. So if you have a brand named Nova, and it generally in the local language it means it does not run, it means that you're not been locally attuned. So a responsive manager would not be doing such mistakes. So another example is feedback loop, which a biomimetic manager should be focusing on, as nature survives on short feedback loop, which is a continuous feedback loop between employees and employers, which is what we can emulate from nature. So this can be studied in detail. I have also discussed this in detail in my earlier video. So as I said earlier, nature works for mutualism and tries to avoid competition. So you can leverage cyclic processes. Cyclical processes are leveraged by most of the species, saguaro cactus, which was discussed in my earlier video. So you can have your business cycle which is emulating nature, so as to avoid competition and create a niche for your product and be a successful manager. So reshuffling information is important. As mentioned earlier, we are not living in silos. Nature does not believe in silos. So which means you cannot be expertised in one field, which means you need to be having cross discussion to be more effective, which means you need to kind of spend time in different departments. There is a concept of job rotation. So biomimetic manager would do well to understand this. So there is a kind of a misconception which has been consolidated in the last many decades, that nature is about competition. It's an extension of social Darwinism, which looks for which emphasis on survival the fittest. Now Darwin never mentioned survival the fittest. It was a term which was given by Herbert Spencer. Now this has been taken up and used by neoliberal value systems to create competition as a basis or a defining characteristic of human relationship, and which has created so much of havoc on earth, and which reduced citizens to consumers and led to crony capitalism and so on. In nature you will have more of mutualism and symbiotic relationship. Even if there is a chance for competition, it tends to avoid it because it's a waste of energy. and generally it create niche. So in an ecosystem, species tend to create niche so that they can avoid direct competition. So nature inputs more on shape than on material, because material is costly. So a biomimetic manager who is also understanding the sustainable way of living need to understand that material is costly. So we can have designs which can emulate nature, where you have this cubicle nested modular setup, which when you need you extend it, when you don't need you can remove it, kind of. So these are innovative ways of thinking and organizing your you know workspace. So incorporate diversity to multiply options. Leopard has been successful as compared to lion or tiger because it's diverse. It's found in different ecosystem and habitats. So similarly, if you extend your products or your business to different markets, that has probability of survival becomes more. So this is an extension of earlier slide, that is to increase diversity. Similarly, you need to be resilient. Businesses need to be resilient, and this can be achieved through variation, redundancy, and decentralization. So if the ultimate aim here is that you don't put everything in one box. So like for instance, you're flying aircraft. So if the wings are, if you don't have options for wing, for instance, the Boeing has wings which is manufactured by different companies, and there are different types of brake system. For instance, you have pneumatic brake system, you have mechanical brake system, and you have electrical brake system. So if one fails, you can always rely on the other. That makes the system resilient. So that is what we are doing in terms of copying nature, emulating nature, and that is, nature does not put everything in one place. So if there is a plant which is doing nitrogen fixation, there will be another species which is going to do the same thing. So if there is a forest fire, if it removes that particular species, the other species survives. So the function remains. So the plants may get destroyed due to natural calamities, but the function is carried on. So extending the concept of resource efficiency, as I said earlier, that nature is focusing on trying to reduce as much as material as possible. Now look at this beetle here, and this is a ladybug. So we see it's actually the outer covering, which is called elytra, which is protecting the wing. It has so much a function, but we have this tetra pack, and it has so many layers to create the same function. So multifunctional design is something which we can think of. So as a biomimetic manager, you also need to focus on how to reduce your expense in terms of creating more efficient products.